Katie,
I was.
go ahead.
Can I actually
Yeah.
give you sort of a follow-up? I'm interested in response to Oscar's talk about authenticity and communications. You brought up the Tea Party and some of their really fantastic use of outreach to sort of the ordinary folks in the real sense that it was grassroots. And yet you saw at the same time an overwhelming movement of candidates towards not even using non-traditional media and certainly shunning the traditional media and having one of the most untransparent things possible. How do you see that tension?
Well, and what she's referring to is that some of the Tea Party candidates refused to be interviewed by traditional media, and
some of them by anyone.
By anyone, and when we're using their own, part of it is that, as you guys understand, I mean, this alternative media is becoming incredibly powerful. I mean, the Huffington Post and other things, Fox News, I mean, which is in some ways an alternative, media. I mean, and so I don't think that's very smart. I mean, I think that's the inverse of what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And I think that there's, because they look like they've got something to hide. They look like there's something wrong, that they don't want to actually talk to but part of the reason they can do it is that the alternative media has become so powerful that they can still reach a lot of folks by imagining that they could turn off the big old media, right? Which of course is silly, because it all has to be done together. But it's a great question. I do think that, I do think this issue of leaders being rewarded, and it's like what Andrew was saying, when Kirsten releases her schedule, there should be blog chatter and people who appreciate that openness to acknowledge it, reward, and write letters in and sort of say where to go, right? I mean, that's the other thing, is there needs to be cheerleading when people take the right step to create encouragement as well.
Katie, I want to ask you whether or not in your views of the other parts of the, other countries' thoughts about democracy. In the United States, a lot of our use of these technologies, as I mentioned earlier, is around getting someone elected, raising money, getting people to the polls. Your platform is obviously
that's my background in politics here, yeah.
But when you go to other parts of the world, people are less interested in they're interested in using these tools not so much to get someone elected, but rather in petitioning government to deliver the services that they traditionally expect government to provide.
Well,
the relationship's different.
That's the beauty of the city box system here. I mean, that's what I'm hearing you're talking about in Mexico also. But were you still going?
No, so that's what I'm saying. So do you? I mean, so in other, what have you seen in other parts of the world where citizens are not thinking of this from a political context, but they're thinking about, okay, I need to get my street fixed, or I need to get that guy arrested. Maybe it's going to take 6 months in trust or a year of trust.
Yeah.
But where people are not thinking about this in terms of pure political power, but rather just making the world a safer place for themselves, or functional place for themselves.
First, I think we're borrowing some of that. I think they might have tried to steal off of your name a system launched last week called Pop-a-Box here that's still just getting started. It's a very bare bones platform that you can go look at. But their idea is working around bills that are in Congress and letting citizens comment on them and give them thumbs up, thumbs down, look at who's talking about what and where the influence is on either side of any given piece of legislation that's actually out there, so you can track it better and think about what the government's actually doing once they're elected. But that's very much what you start to see in other places, because when we say the word democracy, I think it's often understood purely as elections, and it's about voting for people. And yet that might be the one part of it that we've had the hardest time proving people want, right? You get elected, but to get elected you need money, and so you have issues of corruption, and you have some of the most negative perceptions you hear around the idea of democracy being about even you all can't run your elections very well, and they look kind of ludicrous. Why are you trying to bring them here? But you talk about accountability and you talk about transparency, and those things have real resonance. And so what you see are groups where, I mean, we're not always talking about working in democracies. Morocco has an elected legislature. It's true, there's a parliament, but at the end of the day, there's a king, and everything has to be approved by a monarchy still. And so what you have is less of a push for, well, obviously we want only the elected people to run everything, and there's some real skepticism of whether or not people want that. When you say the word democracy, there's some debate about whether that's the model you want to go to, and instead you have, what we want is to be heard. What we want is for our needs to be listened to. And so if you can find ways that people can blog about their problems, that people can create petitions, that people can interact via useful tools and feel like they're being heard, actually you do have a strong step that, I wouldn't call it moving towards democracy, but I do think it moves governance in the right direction. And I do think that those are steps that we can and are, and very well should be encouraging also, instead of simply elections and elections and elections.
Can I just add one point to that, is that in, after the 2008 elections here in the US, Pew did a very extensive poll of people who had volunteered or participated in the elections and outside of voting, and they asked them, you know, what did you do? You know, what was the action you took? And also, you know, what politicians want is money and volunteers, right? But all the high measures and the things that were the things that people wanted was the stuff that involved them, their voice being heard, right? And the opportunity to engage in this sort of new, personal democracy, as Andrew calls it, and this idea that they don't always necessarily believe that it will lead to exactly the right outcome, but they're excited that they have a chance to weigh in about their own community and their future and the stuff that where their kids go to school and the life of their country, and there's unprecedented opportunity to do that now. And I think it's what creates, this is why these tools can create such more vibrant society, because the barrier to entry for involvement has been so dramatically lowered.
But it's also the difference between good tools and bad tools.
Agreed.
Insofar as your father getting to email a video he liked, that's really very self-driven. It's really something that he was impressed by. How many people are on Facebook? And how many people were asked to commit to vote this last week?
Yeah.
And how many people considered that to just be wall spam? I think that there's a real difference between
Yep.
actually reaching out to your friends to vote and then dumping a button on their wall and getting 17
Okay.
of them and threatening not to vote.
We're gonna open this up, but I just wanted to just ask each of you to quickly comment and